The conference room fell silent after Dad's words. I stood in the doorway holding the quarterly reports I'd prepared, watching as my three siblings, Marcus, Jennifer, and David, shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. Not uncomfortable enough to defend me, though. Never that. Dad, I just wanted to drop off the financial analysis you asked for, I said quietly, keeping my voice steady. 7 years of this treatment had taught me to never show emotion. Never give them the satisfaction. Leave it with Carol, he said dismissively, not even looking up from the presentation Marcus was giving. This is a board meeting. For actual stakeholders. Marcus smirked. Yes, Sarah. The adults are talking. I placed the folder on Carol's desk outside and walked back to my office in the building's east wing. The warehouse office, as Jennifer liked to call it, even though I'd been working in accounting and financial analysis for the company for 7 years. 7 years of arriving at 6 in the morning and leaving at 8 at night. 7 years of fixing their mistakes, catching their accounting errors, and preventing at least a dozen financial disasters. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. Don't take it personally. You know how Dad gets about family legacy stuff. You're still part of the team. Smiling face with smiling eyes. I deleted it without responding. The word team meant something very different to them than it did to me. The company, Morrison & Sons Manufacturing, had been in the family for 40 years. Dad built it from a small machine shop into a regional powerhouse with 300 employees and $42 million in annual revenue. And I, the adopted daughter he took in when I was 8 after my parents died in a car accident, was allowed to work there, but never truly belong. My desk phone rang an hour later. Carol's voice came through, apologetic as always. Sarah, your father wants the revised supplier contracts analysis by end of day. The one that takes 3 days to properly compile? He said you're not busy since you're not in the meeting. I pulled up my files. I'd actually finished it yesterday, anticipating exactly this scenario. I'll bring it up in 20 minutes. Just email it. He doesn't want you interrupting the board session. Of course he didn't. I spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing the actual quarterly numbers. They weren't good. Marcus had pushed for an aggressive expansion into the Tennessee market without proper research. Jennifer had approved a marketing budget that was 30% over projection with minimal ROI. David, the youngest at 28, had negotiated a supplier contract that locked us into prices that were already 15% above market rate. But they were blood family. So they sat in the boardroom making decisions while I sat in my warehouse office, fixing their mistakes. At 6 p.m. I packed my bag and headed out. Dad was in the parking lot, talking on his phone near his Mercedes. He saw me and ended his call. Sarah, wait. I stopped, turning to face him. Look, about earlier. You know how it is. The board members, the investors, they want to see family leadership. The Morrison name means something. I understand, I said, keeping my voice neutral. You do good work. Really good. But business is about perception, you know? Marcus, Jennifer, David, they represent continuity. Legacy. Of course. He looked relieved that I wasn't arguing. Great. Oh, and we're having the annual family dinner next Sunday. You should come. Barbara would love to see you. Barbara, his wife. My adoptive mother, who'd made it clear from day one that I was a charity case, not a real daughter. I'll check my schedule, I said. He patted my shoulder awkwardly and walked back to his car. I drove to my apartment downtown, the one I'd bought with my own money 3 years ago. Not the family estate where my siblings still lived rent-free at 32, 30, and 28. That night I reviewed my personal files. The ones I kept at home, not at the office. The ones that showed the real ownership structure of Morrison & Sons Manufacturing. When Grandpa Morrison died 12 years ago, he'd left his shares in a very specific way. Dad got 33%. But the remaining 67% had gone into a trust. A trust that would be managed by trustees until I turned 25, at which point it would transfer directly to me. I'd turned 25 3 years ago. Dad didn't know. None of them knew. The trustees had kept it confidential as Grandpa had specified. The shares were held under a legal entity name that didn't obviously connect to me. And I'd never said a word. I just watched. Waited. Learned exactly what kind of people my adopted family really were. The next morning, Marcus called me into his office. He'd recently redecorated with expensive modern furniture that the company had paid for, though it came out of his departmental budget. Sarah, we need you to run some numbers for us. Dad's considering a major acquisition. What kind of acquisition? Hartfield Manufacturing. They're struggling and we can get them for a good price. Dad wants to move fast. I pulled up Hartfield's public financials on my tablet. They're struggling because they have $18 million in undisclosed environmental liabilities. The EPA is investigating 3 of their facilities. Marcus waved dismissively. Dad's lawyers will handle that. We need projections on revenue integration. Have them ready by tomorrow. This is a bad idea. Good thing no one asked your opinion. Just do the analysis. I did the analysis. I showed in detail exactly why acquiring Hartfield would be a disaster. The environmental costs alone would exceed any revenue benefit for at least 5 years. I included EPA documentation, legal precedent, and financial modeling. Marcus presented my analysis to Dad, taking credit for the work naturally, and Dad decided to move forward anyway. Sometimes you have to take risks in business, Dad announced at the next board meeting. The one I wasn't invited to but heard about from Carol. The Morrison family didn't build this company by playing it safe. Over the next 2 weeks, the acquisition plans accelerated. Jennifer handled the marketing integration plans. David negotiated with Hartfield CEO. Marcus structured the deal terms. And I watched it all happen, making notes, documenting everything. On a Thursday afternoon, Jennifer stopped by my office. Sarah, we're having a celebration dinner tonight. The Hartfield deal is almost done. You should come. I wasn't aware I was part of the deal team. She laughed. You're not. But you're still family. Sort of. Come on, it'll be fun. Dad's buying. The dinner was at Carmichael's, the most expensive steakhouse in the city. I arrived to find my siblings already there, along with Dad, Barbara, and 3 board members I recognized. Thomas Wright, Patricia Chin, and Robert Dalton. Dad raised his glass. To Morrison and Sons and to the next chapter of our growth. This Hartfield acquisition will put us in the top 5 regional manufacturers by revenue. Everyone cheered. Marcus grinned at me from across the table. Even Sarah can celebrate this one. More business means more accounting work for her. Jennifer giggled. David just looked bored, scrolling through his phone. Actually, I said quietly, I don't think there's going to be a Hartfield acquisition. Dad frowned. What are you talking about? The numbers don't work. The environmental liabilities alone will cost more than. Sarah, Dad cut me off, his voice hard. Business decisions are made by business people. Not accountants who've never taken a real risk in their lives. Thomas Wright nodded. Morrison's right. Sometimes you need vision, not just spreadsheets. I took a sip of water and said nothing more. The dinner continued, with everyone discussing the bright future of the expanded company. Marcus talked about the new management positions they'd create. Jennifer outlined the marketing campaigns. David described the operational synergies. No one asked my opinion again. Friday morning, I received an email from Marcus with the subject line, "Urgent final financial review needed." The email contained a massive file, the complete Hartfield acquisition proposal. They needed it finalized by Monday for the board's formal vote. I spent the weekend reviewing every page. The deal was worse than I'd thought. They were paying $43 million for a company with actual assets worth maybe $25 million, and environmental liabilities that could exceed $30 million. It was financial suicide dressed up in optimistic projections. Monday morning, I arrived at 6 a.m. as usual. By 8, the parking lot was full. The board was meeting at 9. Carol called me at 8:30. Sarah, they need you to present the financial analysis to the board. Marcus is presenting it. He's been leading the deal. He said the numbers are your department. You need to be there in 15 minutes. I gathered my files and walked to the boardroom. The large oak table was surrounded by board members, my siblings, Dad, and several lawyers I didn't recognize. Sarah, finally, Dad said impatiently. Walk everyone through the financial projections. I set up my laptop and pulled up the presentation. The acquisition of Hartfield Manufacturing for $43 million represents a significant financial risk for the following reasons. Sarah, Marcus interrupted. Just show them the revenue projections. Everyone here understands there's risk in any acquisition. I continued. Hartfield has $18 million in documented environmental liabilities and potentially another $12 million in undisclosed issues based on We have lawyers for that, Dad snapped. Give us the bottom line. Will this acquisition increase our revenue and market position? In the short term, yes. Revenue would increase by approximately $8 million annually. However, the environmental remediation costs would. Short term is what matters, Jennifer chimed in. We can handle challenges as they come. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. Mr. Morrison, before we proceed to the vote, I need to remind the board that any acquisition of this size requires approval from the majority shareholder. Dad nodded. Of course. I hold 33%, and my children collectively hold another 22% through their inheritance shares. That's 55%. More than enough. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Actually, sir, there's been a discrepancy we've discovered in our due diligence review. The majority shareholding isn't structured the way you've described. The room went quiet. What are you talking about? Dad's voice was sharp. I know exactly how my company shares are distributed. It's regarding your father's estate distribution from 12 years ago. The 67% he held wasn't distributed to you or your children. It went into a trust. I know that, Dad said impatiently. The trust is managed by trustees until certain conditions are met. I've been the effective controller of those shares for years. The conditions were met 3 years ago, sir. The trust transferred full control to the beneficiary when she turned 25. Dad frowned. She. The lawyer looked directly at me. Ms. Morrison holds 67% of all company shares as of 3 years ago. She is the majority shareholder and has been since her 25th birthday. You could have heard a pin drop. Marcus laughed nervously. That's ridiculous. Sarah doesn't own anything. I have the documentation right here, the lawyer said, pulling out a folder. The trust was established by James Morrison Sr. with very specific instructions. Sarah Morrison was named as the beneficiary, with full control transferring at age 25. Patricia Chin, one of the board members, leaned forward. Let me understand this correctly. Sarah owns 67% of this company. Has owned it for 3 years, the lawyer confirmed. Dad's face had gone from red to white. That's impossible. My father would never. Your father's will is public record, Mr. Morrison. The trust documents are confidential, but they're legally binding. Ms. Morrison has been the controlling shareholder since she turned 25 on March 15, 3 years ago. Jennifer turned to me, her voice shaking. You knew. I met her eyes calmly. The trustees informed me when the transfer happened. And you said nothing? Marcus stood up, his chair scraping loudly. You've been sitting there for 3 years letting us run the company and you own most of it? I've been watching you run it into the ground, I corrected quietly. And taking notes. Robert Dalton, the third board member, spoke up. If Sarah is the majority shareholder, then she has to approve this acquisition. That's company bylaws. Dad found his voice. Sarah, this is family business. You're going to approve this deal. I opened my own laptop. Actually, I'm not. I'm voting no on the Hartfield acquisition. You can't do that. I can and I am. The environmental liabilities alone make this deal toxic. You're about to pay $43 million for a company that will cost us $50 million to clean up. Thomas Wright shook his head. Morrison, is this true? Does she actually have the authority to block this? The lawyer nodded. She has the authority to block anything. She's the controlling shareholder. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. This is insane. You're an accountant. You don't know anything about running a business. I know you've increased operational costs by 22% over 3 years with no corresponding revenue increase. I know Jennifer's marketing campaigns have a return on investment of negative 15%. I know David's supplier contracts are costing us an extra $1.2 million per year. Should I continue? The room was silent. Dad's voice was low and dangerous. Your grandfather gave you those shares by mistake. He was old, confused. He was perfectly lucid, I interrupted. And he left me a letter. The trustees gave it to me 3 years ago. I pulled out my phone and read from the scanned document. Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, you've turned 25 and now control the company I built. I'm giving you this responsibility because you're the only one with the sense and work ethic to handle it. My son is a good man but a mediocre businessman, and his children have been spoiled beyond usefulness. Watch them. Learn from their mistakes. And when the time is right, take control. The company needs someone who earned their place, not someone who inherited it. Love, Grandpa. Barbara spoke for the first time. You conniving little. Careful, I said softly. I'm now your son's boss. Patricia Chin was making notes. Sarah, as a board member, I need to ask, what are your intentions regarding company leadership? I closed my laptop. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for Friday. At that meeting, I'll be proposing a restructuring of company management. You can't fire us, Jennifer said desperately. We're family. I'm not firing anyone. Yet. But there will be changes. Marcus, you're being moved from VP of Operations to a senior analyst role in your department. Jennifer, your marketing budget is being cut by 60%, and you'll report directly to me. David, your supplier contracts are being renegotiated, and you're being reassigned to quality control. David finally looked up from his phone, his face pale. You can't do this. I can. I'm the majority shareholder. And Dad. Everyone turned to look at him. His face was ashen. You're being removed as CEO. You'll remain as a board member and advisor, but operational control is transferring to me effective immediately. Sarah, Dad's voice cracked. Please. This company is my life. Then you should have run it better. I stood up. The Hartfield acquisition is cancelled. Someone notify their team. This meeting is adjourned. I walked out of the boardroom, my heart pounding but my face calm. Behind me, I could hear the explosion of voices. Marcus shouting, Jennifer crying, Dad's stunned silence. Carol was at her desk, eyes wide. Ms. Morrison? Please schedule an all-hands company meeting for tomorrow morning at 9. And get me the contact information for every department head. Yes, ma'am. I walked back to my office, the warehouse office, and sat down. My phone immediately started buzzing with texts. Marcus, you're insane. This will destroy the company. Jennifer, how could you do this to family? David, Dad gave you everything and this is how you repay him? Barbara, you were always ungrateful. Your grandfather made a terrible mistake. I blocked them all. An hour later there was a knock on my door. Patricia Chin stood there with Thomas Wright and Robert Dalton. May we come in? Patricia asked. I gestured to the chairs. All 3 board members sat down, looking uncomfortable in my small office. We need to discuss what just happened, Thomas said. I'm exercising my rights as majority shareholder. We understand that, Patricia said carefully. But these are drastic changes. The company has been Morrison family-led for 40 years. And in the last 3 years under current leadership, profitability has declined 7%, employee turnover has increased by 34%, and we've lost 2 major clients due to service failures. I have documentation of everything. Robert leaned back. You've been preparing for this. I've been doing my job, which includes knowing what's actually happening in this company. Thomas cleared his throat. Sarah, I'll be honest. When Morrison brought you in years ago, we all assumed you were just charity. A feel-good story. But your work has been exceptional. Thank you. The question is, Patricia said, are you ready to actually run this company? Being majority shareholder is one thing. Being CEO is another. I pulled out a folder I'd been keeping in my locked drawer for 2 years. This is my strategic plan for Morrison & Sons. Cost reduction strategies, new market opportunities, supplier renegotiations and operational improvements. Conservative projections show we can increase profitability by 15% in year 1, 25% by year 3. I handed them each a copy. They read in silence for several minutes. This is thorough, Robert finally said. It's also achievable. Everything in there is based on realistic assessments of our current capabilities and market position. Patricia looked at me thoughtfully. You really have been preparing for this. Since the day I found out about the shares. I knew if I was going to take control, I needed to deserve it. To prove I could do better than they were doing. Thomas closed the folder. You have my support. For the record, I've been concerned about Morrison's decision-making for the past 18 months. The Hartfield deal was going to be a disaster. Mine too, Robert added. Though I'll admit I didn't expect this. Patricia smiled slightly. I think James Sr. knew exactly what he was doing. You have my vote, Sarah. After they left, I spent the rest of the afternoon making calls. I contacted the Hartfield negotiating team and formally withdrew from acquisition talks. I called our attorney to begin the process of restructuring the leadership agreements. I scheduled meetings with every department head. At 7 p.m. there was another knock. This time it was Dad. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. "Sarah, can we talk?" I nodded, gesturing to the chair. He sat down heavily. "I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me? 3 years and you said nothing. Would you have listened?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Probably not. You've spent 7 years treating me like I was less than your real children. Like I didn't belong. Like I was tolerated but not valued. That's not..." He stopped, unable to finish the lie. "Every decision I questioned you dismissed. Every concern I raised you ignored. Every achievement I made you attributed to someone else. So yes, when I found out Grandpa had given me control of this company, I decided to wait. To watch. To see exactly who you all really were. And what did you see? A family that cared more about appearance than substance. More about legacy than competence. You were so busy making sure I knew I wasn't really a Morrison that you forgot to actually run the company well." Dad's voice was barely a whisper. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to save this company. The one Grandpa built. The one you've been slowly destroying. And us. That depends. Are you willing to actually work? To learn? To accept that blood doesn't equal competence?" He looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. "I don't know if I can work for my daughter." "Then you can retire with your full board member compensation. But you can't be CEO anymore. You've proven you can't handle it." He stood up slowly. "Your grandfather always was a better judge of character than me." He walked to the door, then stopped. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For how we treated you. You deserved better." "Yes," I said simply. "I did." After he left, I stayed in my office until midnight working through the transition plans. Tomorrow's all-hands meeting would be interesting. The staff had no idea what had just happened. The next morning, the warehouse floor was packed with all 300 employees. I stood at the front, microphone in hand, looking at the sea of curious faces. "Good morning. For those who don't know me well, I'm Sarah Morrison. I've worked in accounting and financial analysis here for 7 years. As of yesterday, I became the majority shareholder and CEO of Morrison & Sons Manufacturing." The murmuring started immediately. "I know this is unexpected. I want to be clear about my priorities. First, this company was built on quality and customer service. We're going to return to those values. Second, everyone in this room will be evaluated on merit and performance, not on relationships or tenure. Third, we're going to start treating this company like the valuable enterprise it is, not like a family piggy bank." I saw several people nodding, particularly among the floor managers who'd been dealing with Marcus's poor operational decisions. There will be changes in leadership. But there will also be opportunities. I've reviewed our organizational structure, and there are talented people here who've been overlooked for advancement. That ends now. After the meeting, I was approached by at least 50 employees with questions, concerns, and in several cases, gratitude. The warehouse supervisor, a 20-year veteran named Mike Chin, shook my hand firmly. "Ms. Morrison, I just want to say, we've been hoping for changes around here for a while. Some of us were starting to think about leaving. I hope you'll stay, Mike. I've reviewed your performance records. You're exactly the kind of person this company should be promoting." His eyes widened. Really? Really? Come see me tomorrow. I want to discuss the operations manager position." That afternoon, Marcus, Jennifer, and David appeared at my office together. A united front. "We want to resign," Marcus announced. I looked at them calmly. "Okay." They seemed surprised. Jennifer spoke up. "You're not going to try to stop us?" "Why would I? If you don't want to work here under the new structure, that's your choice." "You need us," David said. "We know this business." "Do you?" "Because the numbers suggest otherwise. But if you want to resign, I'll accept your resignations effective immediately. You'll receive your contractual severance and you can pursue other opportunities." Marcus's bravado wavered. "Just like that. Just like that. However, if you'd rather stay and actually learn how to run a business properly, I'm willing to give you that chance. Your choice." They looked at each other. Jennifer spoke first. "What would that look like?" "It means following my leadership. No special treatment. No end runs to Dad. You do the jobs I assign, you hit the metrics I set, and you prove you can actually contribute. If you can do that, there's a future for you here. If you can't, then leaving now is probably better for everyone. This is humiliating, Marcus muttered. No, this is accountability. Something none of you have ever experienced. They left without another word. 2 hours later, I received emails from all three. They would stay for now. Over the next 2 weeks, I implemented the changes I'd been planning for years. Supplier contracts were renegotiated, saving us $1.4 million annually. Marketing spending was cut and refocused on campaigns with actual measurable ROI. Operational procedures were streamlined. And the most satisfying change: my office moved from the East Wing warehouse space to the executive suite. The CEO's office. I had them remove most of Dad's expensive furniture and replace it with functional pieces. The brass nameplate on the door read, Sarah Morrison, CEO. Dad retired formally at the end of the month. Barbara stopped speaking to me entirely. My siblings worked their reassigned jobs with varying degrees of resentment and, surprisingly, some growing competence. Jennifer actually showed aptitude for data-driven marketing when she couldn't rely on just spending money freely. 3 months into my tenure as CEO, we closed the first quarter with profits up 12%. Employee satisfaction surveys showed a 28% improvement. 2 clients who had left came back. I was in my office reviewing the quarterly results when Patricia Chun called. Sarah, I just saw the numbers. Impressive. Thank you. We're ahead of projections. The board wants to discuss executive compensation. You're still being paid your old accounting salary. I'd forgotten about that in the chaos of transition. I suppose that should be addressed. I'd say so. You're running a $40 million company. Your compensation should reflect that. The board meeting to discuss my new salary package was scheduled for the following week. When I walked in, all 3 board members were smiling. Sarah, Thomas began, we've reviewed comparable CEO compensation in our industry and company size. We're proposing a package that includes a base salary of $320,000, plus performance bonuses tied to profitability and growth targets. It was 6 times what I'd been making as an accountant. That seems fair, I managed to say. Robert grinned. You've earned it. This company is already in better shape than it's been in 5 years. After the meeting, I returned to my office and sat at my desk, the CEO's desk, looking at the quarterly reports, the strategic plans, the future projections. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Mike Chin. Just wanted to say thank you for the operations manager promotion. My wife cried when I told her. You've changed our lives. I smiled and saved the number. That evening, I drove past the family estate. The lights were on and I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. My former family dealing with their new reality. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall. But I felt no guilt either. Grandpa Morrison had given me a gift. Not just 67% of a company, but the chance to prove that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who does the work, who earns their place. And I had earned mine. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 6 a.m. as always. The building was quiet, the parking lot empty except for my car. I walked through the warehouse, past the machines that had been running for 40 years, creating products that people relied on. This was mine now. Not because someone felt sorry for the orphan girl. Not because of charity or obligation. Because I had proven I deserved it. My phone buzzed with the morning production reports. Everything running smoothly. On schedule. Profitable. I smiled and got to work. 6 months later. The conference room was full again, but this time it was different. Department heads, board members, and key stakeholders gathered around the table. And at the head of that table, in the CEO's chair, sat exactly who belonged there. Me. Let's begin, I said, opening the annual review presentation. Morrison & Sons Manufacturing has completed its most profitable year in company history. Marcus sat 3 seats down, taking notes on my operational directives. Jennifer presented marketing results that actually showed positive ROI. David reported supplier relationships that were saving money instead of wasting it. And Dad, retired but present as a board member, watched quietly from the corner. After the meeting, he approached me. Your grandfather would be proud. I know, I said simply. Because I did know. Grandpa Morrison had seen what no one else had. Not a charity case to be tolerated, but a leader waiting for her moment. And when that moment came, I was ready. Family business is for family, Dad had said. He was right. It just took them 7 years to figure out who the real family was.